and fly. Pour me in solid glass. Oh, I have my need. Just come back and listen.
Well, I want to switch gears just a little bit because we've got a bonus for the listeners. We're also going to be drinking a little bit of this right here.
Oh,
this evening.
nice.
We so I'm a big fan of absinthe. I am not knowledgeable about absinthe at all. But Stephen, I want to hear you give this one a rating too.
This
Hey,
one's real
not to
simple.
interrupt real
No,
quick.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
I'll let you guys go ahead. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, while Alan's not here, I can tell you my real honest opinion on this bottle.
Just shit all over it.
And it's real simple. This one is really close to the Weeder. So I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Only I will say this one looks more like a rec center lobby because it's blue.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to remind you that you just switched the Weeder from a 4 to a 6. So is this a 4 or a 6?
You know what? I'm going to cut the difference. It's a 5.
It's a 5. Okay. Okay. It's
It
a
almost
5.
looks like a German, like a Riesling or something that you see in a store.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I think that. So, Alan, Stephen gave it a 5 out of 10, and Ryan said something that I think is dead on. Tell him what you just said, Ryan.
I said it reminds me of a bottle of like a German Riesling when you go into a store.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the labeling on that, of course, is the old labeling. Again, back to that whole distillery trying to figure out what the fuck they're doing. But the wine bottle was on purpose because absinthe has got a very long intertwined history with wine and brandy in general.
Mhm.
Also, it was a way to be able to get that product on the shelf about $10 to $12 cheaper than about every other absinthe out there, because that bottle is so much cheaper. And then that way, the hope was, and it worked until COVID hit. The hope was that would get it into bars easier, because bars have a hard time spending money on absinthe because it is sort of a specialty thing, unless you're in certain areas of the US like New Orleans or now Key West with Jim Martin, what he's doing down there. You don't get that many requests other than for like a Sazerac, and so for those guys to spend money on an absinthe, it has to be justifiable, and keeping that price down a little bit certainly helps. But that is our Le Bleu. That's it's in the vein of a traditional style Swiss Le Bleu. So the French almost always get credit for absinthe, but it was really the Swiss around the town of Cuvée in the mid 1700s, kind of descending from chemists as well as folk doctors and folk healers, folk brewers, sort of. And there's a lot of mystery around where absinthe really came from, but it's really threefold. How it came into being. And anisette spirits have existed for a very long time as digestifs and aperitifs and things of that nature. So the original Swiss absinthe may or may not have been a colored verde absinthe, but the Le Bleu style certainly became popular after the absinthe ban. People had thought at one point in time it caused hallucinations because of alpha-thujone and the wormwood content. It turns out that it never would have caused hallucinations. You would have died of alcohol poisoning long before you ever hallucinated. So the town of Cuvée and in the Swiss Alps in general, where most of these Genepi varieties and these more unique herbs and botanicals grow at, they never stopped distilling it because they always had a tradition of doing the white style of absinthe, and they could bootleg it because it wasn't illegal to sell brandy and it wasn't illegal to sell spirits. It was just illegal to sell absinthe. So if the police see you walking down the street with a bottle of clear liquor, they don't think much about it. But if you walk down the street with a bottle of green liquor, it might become an issue.
Right.
So I've had a really long history with absinthe. Started playing around with absinthe when I was in my late 20s, then got into Copper and Kings and really developed the absinthe program there. And I knew that I wanted to do an absinthe in Indiana when I got the Spirits of French Lick, but it had to be different, right? I can't make the same thing I did at Copper and Kings. Even if I wanted to, what would be the point? Because you're just competing with yourself, right? So we had to do something different. So I want to go back and hit more of that traditional Swiss Le Bleu with true green anise as opposed to star anise. Star anise is super inferior in absinthe most of the time, although ours does have some star anise in it. we really pushed the green anise a lot harder. So what we did is we looked back at old Swiss recipes from multiple sources. We picked out what we liked about those, and then we went through and looked at some old French recipes and found one that had some chamomile in it and a vapor distillation. I thought, well, that's kind of cool. You have some. There's some other botanicals in absinthe that have some unique physiological effects on people, even in small doses. So, of course, everybody knows about chamomile. I thought that'd be kind of neat, because absinthe has a little bit of that, lucid waking dream sort of thing going on anyhow. So we played right into that. And then what we did is we very purposefully, we tried to restrain that absinthe just a little bit. Now, bearing in mind that this was 5 years ago. So absinthe is finally about to have a moment now, somehow, miraculously. 5 years ago, nobody in the Midwest wanted fucking black licorice anything. Like 1 out of 10 people that are into that, and that's it. So we pulled the botanical bill back on that and made it really what I would consider a light style absinthe. And the idea was, listen, if you don't like absinthe, you can give this a try in kind of unique ways. So you can throw it into a highball with A&W root beer. You can make a root beer float out of it, because root beer has a lot of the same flavor profile that absinthe has. We don't tend to think of it as being anise forward. And it really worked. It really got a lot of attention. It got a lot of people into absinthe that I don't think otherwise would have known that absinthe existed. And I think it's a really good entry level absinthe to sort of put you on the path towards getting into those heavier, like some of the jade liqueurs expressions and some of those sort of things, that are a little more big boy absinthe, put on your pants and get to it sort of thing. So
well, when we started getting ready for this episode and the next few episodes that we're recording after this, I was mailing, let's not say mailing because that's illegal, but providing Ryan with what we were going to be drinking for a while. And I stashed some of this absinthe in there, just little 4-ounce pour of it. I got really into it in the mid 2000s whenever I was stationed in Europe, and I used to go to Prague all the time. Absinthe is huge in the Czech Republic. They drink a ton of it all the time, and I got really into it. And tonight I was telling them, okay, let's go ahead and drink some. So I'm going to be drinking just a little bit neat. I've got some mixed with sugar, and I've got a Sazerac cocktail that's mixed. And they were just going to drink it neat. And I was like, okay, look, you got to understand, absinthe can be overwhelming. It can be really, really overwhelming, regardless what the proof is. So I mixed some with sugar, and I was telling them that typically you would do the ritual where you burn the sugar, caramelize it, and then dip it back into the absinthe. But you can't do this with the Le Bleu because that's 120, right? It wouldn't start on fire?
So it would start on fire, definitely.
It would, okay.
Yes, but so traditionally, the sugar cube thing is actually a unique to Czech marketing thing from the mid 2000s. With mostly it was centered around a lot of the sort of questionable, dubious absinthes. Although there are some now there, and for the past several years, there are some great producers out of the Czech Republic. But for a long time, there were some fake absinthes out there that were using. If you see anything that's bright green, it's definitely colored for sure. So the traditional ritual would be just to do what they call the louche. So you have an absinthe fountain full of cold water, or some people use a carafe with cold water in it, ice water typically. You don't have to use the sugar, although I would suggest if you're new to absinthe, I definitely would. And then typically as your palate develops, you kind of get past that sugar thing, because there's so many gustatory illusions that happen in absinthe anyways. But essentially you would put a sugar cube on a slotted spoon, and you would turn the fountain on just a little bit to where you get a drip at a time. And it's typically 3 to 4 parts water to 1 part absinthe dilution. And what you're looking for is for all those oils to fall out of suspension in the absinthe. And we still, scientifically, we still don't know exactly what's happening when that happens. We do know that once an absinthe is looshed, it'll never unloose, which is kind of interesting. But what you're looking for is, as the oils build, and the way that I gauge it, a lot of people will kind of hold it up to the light and look at it. And when you don't see a layer of alcohol on top anymore, is typically when they consider it fully looshed. I tend to, with that Le Bleu in particular, I like to leave just a little layer of alcohol on the top, which is probably setting at about 18% alcohol by the time you get to that that point, more or less. So like a super strong glass of wine, obviously, and that's how it was traditionally drank, especially in the Parisian cafes, because it was used as a replacement for wine because phylloxera had knocked out all the wine grapes, and they had happy hour there just like we do here. It was always with wine, and absinthe was the easiest transition for people. In fact, it was the wine industry that really vilified absinthe and eventually got it banned because they had to get their fucking market share back. So, what's the best way to do that? Oh, you're poisoning people, which some of those guys were, bad.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. There's always room for assholes.
I wanted to try it neat tonight just to get the flavors in my mouth, right?
Yep.
But I did tell them, like, be careful with it. Like, this is 120, but still, like, yeah. So what all, we talked about the mash bill of Lee Sinclair. What all goes into absinthe?
So the traditional trinity is grand wormwood, green anise, and why am I blanking on the third one? Fennel.
Okay.
Those are the three traditional main botanicals of absinthe. And absinthe can be a lot like gin, even traditionally. As long as you have those three ingredients, you've got an absinthe. And some absinthes were just that. So that you have in front of you has got those three ingredients. It's also got hyssop, lemon balm. I believe there's some Ceylon cinnamon in there. There is a little bit of grains of paradise. There's the chamomile edition. There's coriander. Coriander was a lot of times used in absinthe to get a little bit of that citrus characteristic. There is some lemon peel in there as well that we did in the vapor basket, and licorice roots. Those are the ones I can remember off the top of my head without looking at my notes.
Yeah.
But that's where the majority of the flavors are coming from, are from those. And so just like with the whiskey I meant to mention earlier, you'll notice on those whiskeys the mouthfeel. I'm like that with everything I make. Everything that I make has to have a good mouthfeel. I don't care how good it tastes. I don't care how good it smells. Those things are obviously super important. But if they smell great and they taste great, and they don't have a mouthfeel, they're pointless.
Yeah.
So that's really a lot of what we focused on with this absinthe too, and that's where the licorice root came into play, as far as bringing a lot of that mouthfeel to the forefront. Because the licorice root, if you don't know this, it doesn't taste like licorice. The anise is really where that licorice note comes from. Licorice root's just kind of sweet in general. And then of course, after we put licorice root in every botanical distillation we do, then the TTB decides that now you have to have it fucking tested to see if you're over a certain amount of glycerine, because it can be a vasoconstrictor and cause people to have heart attacks. Because some dude ate a whole bag of fucking black licorice and died. Now we have a whole new set of fucking regulations.
What grain is like fermented and then distilled for absinthe?
So what you would traditionally do with absinthe is you would use what they would have thought of as neutral spirit, but not really what we would have thought of. But it would have been grape based most of the time until a little later on, at about 170 proof instead of 190 plus. Back then it was really hard to get anywhere near. I mean, 170 on a pot is pretty impressive to begin with. But a little later on, like if you get into Cuvée and the Swiss Alps, they started using industrial alcohol, which was typically from sugar beets.
Okay.
What we did is we sort of tried to broach, being in the Midwest, with the absinthe tradition here, which I forgot to mention. I think I said that I wanted to be the first absinthe distiller in Indiana. And then when I got into researching it, we found out that there were two commercial absinthe distilleries in Switzerland County, Indiana in 1830. Switzerland County was ironically founded by people from Cuvée who knew how to make fucking absinthe. So they beat me to it by a few years. But we're replicating that now at another project at Locust Grove in Louisville, which is kind of cool. So what we did is we used a grain neutral that we made ourselves from corn, 100% corn. That's 75% of the base alcohol. The other 25% is actually 100% oat whiskey. So again, back to the oats for that mouthfeel and that sweetness, and getting a little of that brandy characteristic, but coming from a grain.
like, do you distill it to that like ridiculously high level and then proof it down, or do you not proof it up as high as like 170, 190?
So when we first started, because we have batch columns is what we have. So they're pot stills, but we have offset columns, or the whiskey still's got a 4-plate column on top of it. We can hit 192, but it takes fucking forever. Like literally you turn a normal like 6-hour distillation into like a 17-hour day.
Wow.
And the entire batch won't come off at that proof because it's dropping alcohol as it goes. So if it's going to normally be a 150-gallon run, you're going to have about 50 gallons that are at 192 if you're lucky. So for like the first several weeks I was at Spirits French Lick, that's all I did for 7 days a week for 2 or 3 weeks, is just distill GNS for future projects, which is as absolutely enthralling as it sounds like it is. So when you produce a botanical spirit, there's sort of 2 different ways of looking at it. So there's the traditional gin method and there's the traditional absinthe method. And what you'll do is you'll take in the traditional absinthe method, you would take your alcohol at 170 proof, put it in the still, and then add your botanicals based on your proof gallons there. Take it up to about 100 degrees for an hour, let it set overnight. Then you would proof it down the next morning, and then you would distill it. The traditional gin method's the same thing, but you start with lower proof ethanol. So you come down to 70 or 80 proof. And you always want to be under 80 proof when you go back into a still anyways, because of the explosion factor, obviously. So on that absinthe, we actually use the traditional gin method instead of the traditional absinthe method, because like everything else, I have to throw a fucking rock in the whole, process just to be different. But I think we got a lot softer extraction with that lower proof than you do at 170. At 170, things tend to be, you get very, very crisp flavors at the forefront, that for people, especially if you're trying to make a lighter style absinthe, for people who are new to absinthe, they're definitely, the main thing they're going to get is that black licorice just right in their face if you go at that 170 maceration temperature. So when you redistill that, you come off the distill at about 145 proof roughly on the pot still. And then you have to really proof that down very, very slowly, because there's so many oils in there. As you saw when you loosh it, it starts turning white. Even going from 145 down to 120, if you drop all that water in there at one time, it'll cloud the tank and you can't get it back out. There's no way to fix it. So
okay, that's really cool.
It's interesting. Yeah, I know nothing about absinthe, and I'm in the industry. I'm a distributor, and I've done a bunch of like wine training, spirit trainings, and there is not a single mention of it anywhere.
It's slowly coming around, man. It's been having a moment. It's trying to been working up to having a moment for about the past year, it seems like. So I think you'll start to see a lot more of it now, in all honesty. My buddy Jim Martin down at Key West Smuggler, I've done a lot of consulting for him, and I did a recipe development for him on a true French Verde style absinthe. I mean, legitimately, even pre-Belle Epoque, this would be an absinthe very similar to what you would have found in like the 1850s, 1860s. And Jim has single-handedly turned Key West into an absinthe town. And I think in another year or two, you're going to see that Key West is going to have as big of an absinthe reputation as what New Orleans does. It fits, it's a perfect place for absinthe. So
yeah,
I'm tasting it now, I think that obviously you get that licorice, but I'm also tasting a lot of, and it's a similar flavor profile, but I don't know if you guys ever had like Necco wafers back in the day.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I get a lot of that from it.
Yep.
I've never had one.
A lot of that.
I don't.
So there's also you guys, I don't know if you guys have this in St. Louis. Did you all have grandmothers that made like macadamia nut cookies?
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if they do this there, but here in the Midwest, they almost always, or here in Southern Indiana, they almost always added a little bit of green anise to those cookies. Just a little tiny hint of it. And I get more of that from that absinthe than I do anything else. It's because I'm fat. Same thing with the fucking Snickerdoodle and Lee Sinclair, So what kind of cookie does this taste like?
Everything is a cookie reference. I love it. So, Stephen, you've never had absinthe in any. Have you ever had ouzo before either?
I had something, I can't remember what it was. There was a party that Ryan had in college, and a friend of ours who was Turkish brought
Yeah.
something, but I
That
can't
would have
remember.
been.
And,
It would have been ouzo, but maybe
Yeah.
the Turkish name for it.
and then we had another friend from Jordan, and they had something similar too.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see those anise spirits a lot of different places. And it's funny. It's one of the few traditional ingredients in distilling and cooking that doesn't follow. Are you guys familiar with the idea of like the butter line that goes through Europe? Or the idea of that? So traditional brewing, distilling, and winemaking kind of follows the same pattern, but like to the north of the butter line, you have countries that use butter and milk, right? They used animal products, and to the south of it, they tended to use oil. But anise is one of those things that goes across that line and gets used across the board. So you'll see references to anisette spirits in old recipe books going back to maybe the early 1500s, late 1400s. And they're not terribly different from Ozu, Iraq, absinthe, etc. They're very similar to that.
That's the
in a lot
name of it.
ways.
It was Iraq.
Yeah, Eric.
Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah, he always tried to make us drink it. I'm like, dude, get that away from me, man.
That
But
one
we
can
had
be weird too, depending on who's made it and how they made it, because that sometimes that's a single pot distilled, meaning it just ran through the still one time, and a lot of times they'll make it out of like a grappa base, so the base is already a little funky anyways, so it can get super weird real quick.
Yeah, and it didn't look like great packaging either. Like, where'd this even come from? He was
My
crazy
uncle.
though. He could
My
drink
uncle.
a bottle. He could drink a bottle of whiskey, man. And it was funny because he's from the Middle East. His English would get better the more he drank. And
The more he
was-
Right.
By the end of the night, he's speaking perfect English.
Well, that's the thing about absinthe too, is that it's still a medicinal spirit. In the very least, that if it doesn't fix whatever problem you have, it'll make you forget about it for a little while. So
It does it does that well, that's for sure. So Stephen, which ways have you tried it so far?
I tried it some straight. I tried some with little water, then with ice and a little water, and then a little bit of sugar cube I crushed up in it.
Okay, what do you think of it?
I think that I actually liked it quite a bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that my favorite way obviously was adding a little more to it, but man, it really started to really, really taste good on like the fourth or fifth sip whenever I had a little bit of sugar cube in it. So I can definitely see, like, I was really interested in the A&W root beer highball or something like that. I think that'd be really, really good. I'm tempted to try that.
it works extraordinarily well. And then if you guys don't, I don't know if you guys have this or not, but if you don't have it, that's the one you need to get. That's the barrel aged. It's the same recipe, but what I did is I took New American
Badass
Oak
label,
number.
by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me and Jolie worked on that one for a long time to get that right. So it's named after a Cure song, right back to the to that whole thing. So there's a line in that song about kicking the last nail in, waiting on you to kick the last nail in. I thought, yeah, that fits absinthe perfect. So
is that available like around?
So this is distillery only. Now, Stillbox had some. Blake had some. But the story that I heard was that Blake bought it for himself. But I know Blake, if you message Blake and you go, I know you're holding out, he'd probably come off of a bottle of it's my guess. But there will be more of this in the future. But this is aged in number 2 charred oak barrel for a year, basically. So this is, we were trying to go for a hybrid. So like I gave you the light style absinthe as an introduction. Now what I want, so absinthe drinkers don't typically drink bourbon. Bourbon drinkers don't typically drink absinthe, but there's room for that crossover, right? So this is that crossover. So this one's a little lower proof, 106 proof. And we intended this to be drank like a bourbon, either neat or on, a single piece of ice, whatever. It's also really good with the root beer as well. Or to even serve it, because it's got a lot of sweetness to it, or a lot of perceived sweetness. There's no sugar in it. So to be used as almost like a dessert wine sort of thing. And then you'll notice too, I did the most dickish thing ever on this one. It's great. It's that's amethyst filtered down there, guys. That's real highbrow shit. It doesn't. I'm not gonna sit here and fucking tell you that it does anything whatsoever. I mean, it does whatever your magical thinking wants it to do. Obviously, it was really just a shout out to Dan Aykroyd because fucker, filtered vodka through Herkimer crystals, Herkimer diamonds, and I love fucking Dan Aykroyd. So, I'm just living in my idol's footsteps there.
So
Crystal had available at
Oh, go ahead.
Benny's exclusively now. I think. I don't know. I don't
Really?
ever see that vodka anymore. Well, I'm sure other places have it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't seem like it was the biggest mover, but it was a cool,
seen
it was
it
a
for
sweet ass
Tux.
bottle. Do you?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it too often anymore.
I've always thought about I should have bought one because I'm like I said, I'm a huge Dan Aykroyd fan, but I always thought about buying it just to have the bottle, and I never could, like, every time I'd see it and I'd see the price, I'm like, no, I think I'm good.
Well, if we ever come visit, I'll swing by and get a bottle for you.
There you go.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say we need to your distillery is like high on my list now. Like the fact that William Dalton, I have to go to your distillery to get it. Like that's a huge reason for me to go visit your distillery because I love toasted barrel. And, like toasted barrel bourbons to me are like why did it take us 400 years to figure out how great a toasted barrel? Like bourbon is great on its own, but now a like slow toasted barrel, yes please.
I suspect that we knew back before industrialization, and we just forgot about it because of industrialization. Is what I suspect. Yeah, that Dalton, guys, that one. I feel like the two highest points in my career right now have been that Lee Sinclair Iconoclast and then that William Dalton.
Mhm.
I would put those up against the harshest craft critic out there. And you know what? Maybe they destroy it, maybe they don't, but I feel like they're pretty good representations of what craft distilling can be and should be. But you're going to want to make it by the distillery sometime this year because so we're going to be dropping the Bottled and Bond William Dalton, as well as the Bottled and Bond Morning Glory, which is a buckwheat and toasted kasha bourbon, at least in June. And then this coming fall, we'll have the Bottled and Bond 5-year-old Solomon Scott Rye whiskey. We went the exact opposite of every other craft distiller who were all doing 2-year-old ryes and then, waiting on the bourbon. We went with, 2 different wheated mash bills at a young age and then waited on the rye for 5 years. And then this fall, we'll have a Bottled and Bond apple brandy. And then we'll also this summer have a tequila barrel completely matured in tequila barrel apple brandy that'll be out.
You really are doing thing exactly opposite of what everybody else is doing, and I think that that's fucking cool. Like I can't tell you how many. So I'm a part of so many annoying ass bourbon groups, right? Like bourbon douches are. I despise. They are the fucking worst. So when Ryan first approached me about like this podcast was Ryan's idea. We got stupid drunk and we talked about it while we were both drunk pissing on a tree in my front yard.
I'm surprised we even remembered it.
Yeah. And I told him, I said, okay, but the next day I said, we'll do it, but we're not going to be one of these pretentious douchebag types of shows. And bourbon douches just piss me off. And they get so excited about some fucking tequila that was aged in a George T. Stagg barrel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And first of all, I'm not a fan of tequila. Second of all, like, you're missing the point. You're not getting, like, what that barrel did to that bottle, that whiskey that became George T. Stagg. It's not doing the same shit to that tequila. It's done. It's finished. Anyway.
And if you've followed me on social media for very long, you know that I have a history of disliking those people because I'm very fucking irreverent about spirits to begin with. And all those dickwads are literally just armchair quarterbacks. They're not good enough to distill themselves. They have no actual practical experience, but they somehow think they know more than the distiller does. And I don't have a whole lot of patience for that. And I don't mind, like, if we get a bad review or we're not somebody's cup of tea, that's fine. I didn't set out to make all those people happy. Just don't be a dick just to be a dick. Life is really not that hard. Yeah, no, I feel you on that. I've gotten myself in trouble more than once or twice for calling some of those people out over the years. And but
Good
I
for
will tell you
you.
this. Sometimes this industry is as much about who you make mad as it is who you make happy. So because you piss them off, you know what? They're still talking about you.
Mm-hmm.
Let them go ahead.
I can't think of a more perfect segue to rate this guy.
I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly. All right, so let's do Lee Sinclair and Absinthe. Le Bleu. All right. Who wants to go first?
I'll go ahead and give my opinion. I think that you said earlier that I gave the Weeder like an 8.4, I think.
Correct.
And I'm gonna stick the same way with this. I'm gonna give it an 8.4. I think that I really like it as well. And to be honest with you, it would be a total coin toss to say which one I liked more. I think they're wonderful compliments to one another. I was expecting that I wasn't gonna like it that much again. Just like with the Weeder, I expected that. Initially coming into it, especially with the smell, I was like, I'm not sure I'm gonna like this. This time it smelled like the Weeder, but I was like, there's no way it's gonna live up to the Weeder now. And yet it did. I was really pleased with it. It's clear that you guys are doing stuff that just nobody else does, flavor wise, smell wise. Like it's so distinctive. It's really like your signatures on everything, man. And I really appreciate it. 8.4. For the
Alan, that is huge high praise from Steven. The only things that are higher than an 8.4, I think, are Smoke Wagon Uncut and Unfiltered, Smoke Wagon Small Batch, and Weller 107.
Nice. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And this is our 40th episode. And so you're in your top 5 with 2 of your whiskeys.
Hell yeah.
And I gave that first rating without you being on the show. So,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's true.
The Absinthe, I don't really have anything to compare it to be honest.
Right.
Besides that weird Iraq that our friend brought to a party.
It's better than that.
With that being my 5.0, I'll give this guy a 9.
I'll take it, man.
Yeah.
Take
Well,
it.
let me
really
ask
like
you
it,
this,
though.
Steven. Will you keep a bottle of Le Bleu stocked? Let's put it that way.
If I was finding it more often, I would. Now, would I search it out? I'm not sure. Like, I probably wouldn't buy it that often, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'll say I am definitely going to go to Sealbox. I'll send a message and see if I can get one of the Fascination Street.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
The Absinthe's hard as well. I'm in the same boat as Steven. I think I've had was it, or how do you pronounce it even?
Eric.
Eric.
Yeah.
I've had that.
I can't say it right. I'm too Hoosier to say that shit.
maybe have had that 2 or 3 times, and it was never good, but I was always hammered. And I think I had Absinthe once. I really like this. Easy to drink. Like Steven said, I'd love to do it in a root beer float sometime.
Yeah.
So I kept about half the bottle, so that's exactly what I'm going to use it for. The one that Dan sent. But yeah, I love
Nice.
the baking spice that's on the bourbon. You're doing like weird, crazy, obscure things that no one's doing, and I hope you guys keep growing and doing everything. I think it's a great bourbon. I'm gonna go an 8.3.
Oh yeah.
I can't wait to come down and see you, man. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a good time. And anything Dan gets, hopefully he shares with me going forward if I'm not able to get any. Dude,
if you can't tell, I provide them with the bourbon.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I told Dan too a couple months ago. I'm like, if I have to drive to South Bend, I will. He's like, no, I'll just ship. I think you were actually the reason why he started not shipping bourbon
Not
to me.
shipping. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. You guys will get with me here in a few weeks, a little bit down the road after you get some more episodes going and everything. And I'll get you guys. Let's send out some samples of the William Dalton, so you guys can follow up on your weeder, and send you a sample of the Morning Glory buckwheat bourbon as well, so that you guys can do something with those.
Dude,
So-
that'd be outstanding.
That'd be awesome.
We appreciate it. I mean, completely unnecessary, but
Yeah.
greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you think of them. So just you'll want to again. I've lost one of my life coaches, so You're gonna have to like message me sometime in June and remind me of that. But yeah, I would love to see what you think of them.
For my rating, so I want to throw out there that my notes say that Ryan, for the Weeder, you rated it a 7 point. You rated the Weeder a 7.5, and I rated the Weeder a 7.9. I'm gonna go. You know what? Now I'm gonna stick with. I'm gonna do the exact same thing that Steven did, and I'm gonna stick with a 7.9 for the Lee Sinclair. It's still an excellent bourbon, but to like compare which is better, Lee Sinclair or the Weeder, I don't know. It's a toss up. It depends on my mood. Like,
and I can't wait till you guys get the bottled and bond too, because it's so different than that original Lee Sinclair.
Yeah. I mean, so we were supposed to do the Maddie Gladden tonight, and I swore to God I still had some Maddie Gladden left, but I mean,
every time I drink Maddie Gladden, that's what happens. Just wake up the next morning and look at the bottle and be like, "Oh God,
poof, it's gone." Now
Right.
I do have a very disorganized bourbon area. Like, here, I'll share. It's just really, really disorganized.
Jesus.
wow."
So like, but I could have sworn that I had some over there, and I told you that I had some, and I went over and I was like, "Fuck, I can't find it. Well, I don't know what the hell happened to it." So anyway, yeah, seriously, Alan, you're doing such great shit. I love what you're doing, and I want to throw out there that I didn't rate this earlier, but I do keep this stocked pretty regularly because I really like having a Sazerac cocktail, and absinthe isn't a key, and you have to have a decent absinthe to make a good Sazerac.
Oh, yeah.
And this one is honest to God, in my opinion, perfect for a Sazerac cocktail because it's not so overpowering that it overpowers the rye that you're adding. It doesn't overpower the bitters. It adds the complexity. It adds a sweetness from that like black licorice anise taste to the Sazerac cocktail that I just really appreciate. So I will always have a bottle of that. Hey, Alan, where can we find you on the interwebs?
Nowhere, because I'm gonna fucking disappear. Because fuck this industry. You can find me at spiritsofFrenchlick.com, alchemistcabinet.com. You can find me on my podcast, Distillers Talk, and then on various forms of social media where I'm not ignoring you. I'm just getting blown up constantly.
Another bourbon show. Another bourbon show. Another bourbon show.
You know, she's welcome to join.
She's just trying to cock.
Oh.
She's what?
Do you see that?
Get out the wine opener.
I'm glad I had that recorded at the time. Fuck you, dude.
Dude, get the wine opener.
Use the silver spoon that you were born with to get it out, dude.
You know what? Fuck this.
I thought you were gonna bust open the bottle.
No.
He just.
I will use Templeton 6-year.
All right, whatever.
You're gonna be fucking dude. That's recorded, right?
Yeah. That's so funny, dude. I'm
gonna make sure
night we drink this fucking Sazerac.
The Sazerac.